Okay, we're about to go live.
Yesterday. Yeah.
All right, it looks like we're finally live.
Oh, we are. Okay. Okay.
So, my apologies to everybody for being a little bit late, but technology can sometimes be very helpful, but glitches happen from time to time.
Yes.
But I'm really grateful that our audience had waited patiently for us. And so we will immediately launch into our book conversation. I will just give a brief introduction once again. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching us. My name is Ermin Sinanovic. I am the executive director of the Center for Islam in the Contemporary World at Shenandoah University. And with me is Professor Abdulaziz Sachedina. Professor Abdulaziz, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry about the delay.
No, it happens. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction of the professor, and then we'll launch into our book discussion immediately. Abdulaziz Sachedina is professor and endowed IIIT chair in Islamic studies at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. He has been conducting research and writing in the field of Islamic law, ethics, and theology, both Sunni and Shia, for more than 4 decades. In the last 20 years, he has concentrated on social and political ethics, including interfaith and intrafaith relations, Islamic biomedical ethics, and Islam and human rights. He is the author of numerous books, the latest of which is the book that we are discussing today, and that is Islamic Ethics, Fundamental Aspects of Human Conduct. Professor Sachedina, thank you so much for agreeing to doing this book talk. And I will start with a question that I always ask of every author. Why did you write the book, and what is the main thesis or argument of the book?
Yeah. Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to discuss my latest work. I regard this as a kind of summation of my search for the last almost 20 years, how to reintroduce ethics in Islamic studies without having to depend upon Aristotelian ethics. And why can't we depend on the scriptural sources like the Quran and the tradition itself, the Sunnah, in order for us to understand what exactly is Islam, trying to teach us? Because one of the central messages of the Quran is, how to live as Muslims in the world. And when you talk about how to live, that means you're talking about human action, human intentions, human duties, and all the good things and bad things that human beings do to one another, to themselves, to the society as a whole. And my search had to begin to establish my own authenticity in claiming that there are beliefs in the Quran, that there are no indications in the Quran that force us to think about morality and ethics much before we can think about what called halal and haram. In my understanding, the halal and haram are the ethical categories. They are when we say something is halal, that means we assume that that thing is good. It will not cause harm to anyone. And also when we say something is haram, then also we understand that prohibition connects with some evil aspects of the action. So there is already what I call the foundation, I would say metaphysical foundation of the Sharia itself. The Sharia does not come into being without taking the Quranic understanding of morality as its central location of how human beings should live. Because whatever the Quran is doing, whatever the religion of Islam is trying to teach human beings, it is trying to teach human beings 2 things. One is a responsibility and duty towards oneself. This is what we call the wujub nafsi. That means it is something connected with my own soul. I'm responsible for its growth, for its development in the way that it should be, guiding my future activities. The second aspect is that the Quran is also very much keen to create a human being who, even if he or she denies faith in God, they cannot deny the duty towards other human beings. In other words, I'm trying to find a universal connection that the Quran is drawing between morality and human existence. That regardless of whether I'm a Muslim, a Christian, a Jew, or anything else, I'm bound by the language that the Quran is trying to teach me. The Quran is trying to teach me that you, human being, you have to learn to be tazakki. You have to learn to be purified. And your moral activities will lead you to moral purification and spiritual well-being because they're related in the Quran. The Quran looks at morality closely connected with spirituality. And you and I know that spirituality is very difficult to gauge, but what is easier to gauge is human behavior. Therefore, I'm trying to understand very fundamental aspects of human conduct. How is it that human beings make a decision? What is it that earns them the praise? What is it that earns them the blame? So my undertaking of writing this book is to come back to the Quran and ask a very important question to myself as a Muslim. Okay, you are a scholar, but you are a Muslim, you are a student of Islam. Shouldn't you be asking yourself, I'm telling myself, by the way, shouldn't you be asking yourself that you need to live a decent life as a human being before you can claim even to be a faithful in the Islamic community? So I connect what we call إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا عَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Human beings believe and they do good things. The Quran says human claim to believe is connected with human ability to act righteously, to do the good things. And that's the meaning of Tazakki. Tazakki wants to create an ideal human being in the society, a human being who is excellent in morality. Well, who can write this? I'm trying to find, by the way, my other motive of writing this book was that as long as I remember, we always studied akhlak in the madrasa, in the hawza, in the, religious schools as something that was handed down in terms of virtue ethics. So we knew the fazail, the merits, we knew the radail, the vices. Now we were told, you better habituate the fazail and go away from the razail, from the vices. And that's the way to live. Therefore, we have several books, by the way, written from the philosophical point of view. It is Aristotelian inspired virtue ethics, but it is fully Islamized because Islam has a lot to say. The Quran, on every page, I can show you that there is question about the justice, there's a question about taqwa, which is moral and religious consciousness that we have. And all these things, I think, pushed me to say I must search very carefully and I must must converse with my fellow scholars in Islam how to garner the importance of ethics in Islam, in the Quran, in the tradition.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a wonderful introduction to the book. And I will just mention to our viewers who maybe not all had a chance to take a look at the book or read it, is I was struck with a very autobiographical take on the book. You write from a very personal perspective in this book. Right. And so this is a very different book than what you often find. It is very deeply steeped in scholarship, but it is very clear that your voice leads the book, which often in reading the book, we do not often find. So there is an autobiographical aspect. Now, at the beginning of the book, you talk about these two concepts, tazakki and akhlak. And you mentioned in your earlier response to my question a little bit about this. But can you tell us a little bit more about these two concepts and why do you think they're central for the book and the project on Islamic ethics that you're doing in the book?
Right. I think that one of the reasons that I still maintain the word akhlak, because the Quran is teaching akhlak fitri, something that is naturally endowed. It is infused in the human beings, because the Quran is very clear that it says quite clearly that when we create human beings, we also inspire human beings to do the good and to avoid the evil. وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. It's quite clear that the Quran is saying that from the time we create human beings, we infuse human being with a sense of right and wrong. This is very powerful, by the way. This very verse will take me to argue that we do have a thesis of natural law in Islam. It's not limited to Catholic tradition, or I don't know, whatever the other traditions might be. I'm actually looking at the way the Quran is approaching the creation of human being. With the creation of human being, with the fitra, with the, very idea of ilham. Ilham about what? What are you inspired about? You human being, what are you inspired about? You are inspired about what is a successful life and what is a damning life. How different they are. If you follow the good path, this is where it will lead you. If you follow the bad path, this is where it is bound to lead you. So when you look at these verses of the Quran, and then the constant reminder, wa'adilu, waqsitu. The Quran is adamantly insisting that nothing can come between you and justice. Even your parental love must sacrifice itself if your parents are not on justice. You need to follow justice, and you need to bear testimony to the good things in spite of all your other relatives saying, no, this is okay, you can do it. You will not agree because this is innately given to you. This innate aspect is zakah. It is to purify someone from within. This is so powerful that the Prophet ﷺ used the zakah and tazakki as the name of the religion he was teaching. Yes, we have evidence that in the early days, this was the name of Islam, tazakki. That means the process of learning how to purify yourself and how to live a moral life. And this is something that the Quran is, adamantly teaching us that, look, you can have faith, but if you don't have good behavior, no, that's not acceptable. You need to show through your faith your ability to transcend your personal selfishness, your sense of, doing only for yourself and not for others. So sacrifice, you will not be able to do it if you don't understand what is the moral value of sacrifice. So it is closely connected with human emotions. I call it emotive ethics. That means you are inspired by the sense of when you see somebody poor on the street, if you show your indifference to that poor person, then you are missing a point. What the Quran is saying that, atihim, give them something, give them, help them out. In other words, you can't remain indifferent when things are going wrong. One of the important messages of the Quran connected with tazakki is that if you see the wrong being done and if you keep quiet, then you are a participant in the wrongdoing. So you can imagine the zalimin is zalim or zulm is such a broad category in the Quran. And therefore Allah says, Quran says, we will not forgive you for if you do the wrong. If you hurt others, if you cause harms to others, we will not forgive you. And this is, I think, the cornerstone of Islamic ethical social norms. The norms are going to lead us to discover the normative ethics. And this is what I am trying to do in the book.
Thank you very much. I would like to remind our audience that you're more than welcome to post your questions and comments in the chat section of our YouTube channel, and we will take these questions after Professor and I finish our conversation. I have a few more questions to ask, and then I will turn to your questions. Professor, the ethical theories and practice in Islam are found in different spheres of Islamic disciplines, in kalam, in fiqh, in akhlak, and you make a strong claim in the book that for you, the core of Islamic ethical message and practice is to be found within the juridical tradition that Islam had developed. Can you elaborate on this, please?
Okay, so here I'm now transcending and bringing ethics in conversation with ilm al-kalam, with theology. And when I talk about theology, when I talk about ilm al-kalam, I'm talking about those ideas in ilm al-kalam which speak about human freedom of will or divine will, and how they interact in order for creating a human being who is equally responsible to carry out the divine command ethics. Whenever God says, this is what you are supposed to do, all these things are part of the divine command ethics. God is commanding you, to do the good. God is commanding you to do the salat. All of these things are connected with the very important issue in the Quran, and that's encouraging human beings. This is known as al-amr bil ma'ruf, because al-ma'ruf in the Quran is the known, what we call commonsensical good. There is no human being, for example, the Quran's argument can be interpreted in this way. There is no human being who, if was faced with the cruelty to children, would show indifference. They would all agree that this is cruel. It cannot be done to the children. Even if they happen to be the children of, people that we don't agree with. You can't do this to the children. We are now seeing in Ukrainian war that how the case of the children becomes a very heated, topic for the considering. This is what I call the ethics that has been endowed to us. And I think that what the whole, idea of the Quran is that how to create a legal system that is sensitive to the very important values that you and I would call, these are moral values. Cause no harm is a moral value. Do not reciprocate harm with harm. That's another value. And it plays with other values and creates what we call a synthetic fiber of norms. Those norms are the ones that we apply. So when I looked at the usul al-fiqh, by the way, when I saw the legal theory, I found surprisingly, why should I be surprised, first of all? No, I should not be surprised. I should have actually found it there. The usul al-fiqh, actually, when you study usul, then it says, ad-darar al-muhtamal, very likely, damage to you could happen. And it says, no, you will not do that. This is not allowed for you to do it. In other words, the negation of human action, it comes after what we call a very given, assessment of the ethical situation. So ethical situation is very important for the Quran. Look at the way the fiqh is dealing with such small, delicate matters that you and I take for granted. Imagine if I come to your house, even if you're a Muslim, and if I begin to pray without your permission, then I'm doing something wrong. Oh my God. I can't even do the wudu in your tap running water because it belongs to you. Without your permission, I cannot do anything. How about, going in the airport and say, I want to pray here in front of everyone. If airport authority says you're not supposed to do it, then your salat becomes batil. How can a salat between me and my God have this social dimension with it, has this moral dimension with it? Everything that you do, inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. Fahsha and munkar are ethical categories. to do shameful things, to engage in the vices. This is a ethical category. And the Quran says your prayer will be able to actually generate in you the sense of shame when you do something wrong. You will be ashamed of doing something bad. Now, that's what we need from the Quran. The Quran is very, very powerful when it comes to saying that, wattaqullah. Even before he says, wattaqullah wa yu'allimukum Allah, whatever God is going to teach us, first of all, you must create moral and spiritual consciousness in you. Taqwa is a rich term in the Quran. It's not fear. It is reverential fear. It is fear out of, respect. My father is sitting there out of respect. What I do, I don't smoke in front of him. I keep that respect. This is ethical, by the way. This is moral obligation that you should do. Not smoke in front of your parents. Not, the Quran is a miraculous book, by the way. It's not because I'm a Muslim, I'm saying, the more I study it, the more I realize that the Prophet had such a great mission for his people that he wanted, on the one hand, to prepare them for the new community, which he called the Ummah, and then also prepare the community of the Ummah with other communities in the world. The Prophet knew that not everyone will accept Islam, but he wanted to make sure that even if they don't accept Islam, they must learn to live in harmony. How would they do it? If they have moral sensibilities, if they recognize duties towards one another, then they will be able to live together. So fiqh, interpretive jurisprudence, is full of examples after examples. Right, look at this, Zakat. You must pay zakat every year from your wealth. And whatever you count, whether 2.5% or 40%, whatever I want to do, but you are supposed to pay your zakat. Fiqh zakat, that means jurisprudence connected with zakat, is totally moralistic. It is ethical. You cannot give your zakat to outsiders, when somebody in your family is ashamed because of poverty, they are not able to ask for help. You go and silently help them, and even don't tell them, I'm giving you zakat. Say, I'm giving you a gift. Look at the way the morality is brought at the excellent level. It's not satisfied by you saying, you're my dear uncle, I give you zakat. No. Tell him, I'm giving you a gift. This is a gift for you. And you know very well that you are giving your zakat to this person. Then, the way the rules of the zakat, you look in your neighborhood, give them help. From all that I'm learning, by the way, is that, yes, it says, find those who are in your community to help first. But it doesn't stop you from helping outside the community to the poor people. It is a very broad category of helping others. Look at the way interpretive jurisprudence would be connected. My best example, which I like to quote everywhere, is in the rulings about multiple wives. Yeah, I think we all are concerned about this because we want to understand what is exactly our duty. What should we do? I'm married to a woman for the last 40 years, let's say. And now my silly imagination takes me, and I fall in love with, a younger woman. So I go to my local imam, and say, I want to marry this woman. And he doesn't ask the question much, but, he said, okay, yeah, you are allowed to buy. You are allowed to, make another contract with another woman as your married wife. You can have, you're allowed to have second wife or third wife or the fourth wife, if there are reasons for you and if you can treat them in justice. But remember, one of the questions that was not asked by the imam, who are you married to now? Oh, I'm married to this old woman who's, I'm married for 40 years and I'm not interested in her. That's where the imam needs to ask the ethical questions. What do you mean you're not satisfied with her? Did she not contribute to your life for the last 40 years? Was she not your partner for the last 40 years? How can you leave her? at this age, when she needs you, you say, I don't need you. I'm going to this younger woman, you know. This is, by the way, the legal aspect says you can marry a second woman, but the ethical aspect says no, you can't do injustice to your first wife. You must be very careful if you're going to marry another woman. In other words, ethical requirements are part of the ethics of the Sharia itself. The Sharia is demanding that you don't apply law without considering the pros and cons of the morality that is connected with it. And there's no action, by the way. There's no action in our life. Imagine I have participated many times in the hospital to decide about the end of life decisions. End of life decision, they might appear to people very, very, low key issue. No, it's a very major issue in the hospitals. And we need to get proper permissions from people who are connected with the sick person. Imagine if you take any wrong action there, it is ethically going to challenge you. It's going to be a moral challenge to you. Are you willing to give up your mother? And, say you are not going to do enough of the, treatment. Or are you going to say, let's treat, let's find out what can be done? Your obligation, your ethical duty in Islam is to be careful, not to be in a hurry, to end the life which can be cured. You never know that life might be, help you to cure that person. But if there is all that, medical information given to you says, no, this is not going to work. We are simply prolonging the illness. Then you have a different obligation. And again, these are ethical decisions that the Sharia would use for you to be able to make the right decision.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have a couple more questions, but before I turn to that, I actually want to turn to a question from our audience. So Mohammed Dawji is asking the following. From an Islamic perspective, are humans innately moral? That is to say, they may fall into evil behavior, or are we innately selfish and have to learn and practice to be moral?
My simple answer is that the Quran regards human beings born with a good nature. It's the fitra. So we have a sensibility in us to know right and wrong. You find that, look at the children. When your small boy or girl brings flowers to you, what do you say immediately to her or to him? Thank you, Baba. Thank you so much for this flower. So the child is already knowing that there is something distantly connected with offering the flower. And my parents were very happy to see that I brought the flower. And I think here is what we call the values are generated in a child. But the child is, by the way, naturally endowed. In the tafsir of the Quran, we find that many mufassirin regard something very naturally given to the children as the good nature. We don't believe that the child is born in original sin. We don't believe that, but we certainly believe that it has the ability. We don't say it's already developed. It is innately there for the child to learn from us, from the parents, from the neighbors, from the society. The society is going to nurture a child. This is a collective obligation in the society. And I think that I would say to Muhammad Devji that, yes, I think we are given a good sense of what is right and wrong from the very beginning. And the children learn from us, from their friends, from the society.
Thank you very much. Professor, we have another question from the audience. Amira Abu Talib is asking, she says, thank you for this lecture. How do we deal with modern ahkam or laws in family laws in many Muslim majority contexts that are unfair to women, for example? They seem to defeat the purpose of maqasid today.
Maqasid are, in my opinion, all ethical principles. Everything that we think about in the maqasid fiqh is closely related to the moral ethics, to the ethics and to the principles and theories that are connected. If you look at the description given by Al-Mawaqif, Al-Shatibi and others, then the description of these 5 principles, or the 5 maqasid, or 8 maqasid, or whatever the number, I think it is important to remember that maqasid means objectives. Whose objectives are we talking about? We are talking about divine objectives. So daruriyat are this way, tahsaniyat are this way. All of these things are connected with the ahkam that are ethically bound to do the right thing. Now, let me tell you that laws are sometimes reflecting cultural attitudes. The culture is such that it is unkind to women. The culture is such that they regard women as evil. The culture does so many wrongs, by the way, that we very easily attribute it to religion. Ahkam are sometimes responding to the culture. And unfortunately, not enough homework is done by the legal authorities that this is not going to work in terms of ethics. We might say this is fulfilling the Sharia, this is fulfilling, the laws, but it is not always true. We have to do more rigorous research in order to find out, is it right to treat a woman like that? Does a woman have a lesser dignity than men? And the answer will be no, she is equal. She is in every aspect, she is a legal personality equal to men. This is how Islam treats them. That there are laws concerning women, there are laws concerning women, and they should be observed with the careful analysis of ethical values that must be given to the family. So when the Quran says, "Ar-rijalu qawamun 'ala an-nisa," it is very important to keep in mind that the men are the managers of the wealth and the things that are done for the family. They are the ones who go out, who earn, and who relieve the family with the needs that they are in the household or even in the society. Now, if tomorrow the role changes, I as a man am not able to earn, I'm not finding a job. My wife is the one who is qualified and she finds a job. What happens to the ayah of the Quran? The ayah of the Quran is given as a permanent, solution to the human problem. That look, somebody who goes out and works has a different obligation, and someone who is at home has a different obligation. I mean, they all are socially and contractually worked out. Is it not possible for the contract to change if a woman is the one who is breadwinner and man is at home, without a job? It can change. And therefore, the woman's authority becomes equal, even far more superior, because she is the one who is managing the finances. So look at the way Islam is interpreted today. I think the laws that are unfair to women needs to be studied again rigorously with the ethical values in mind. So when we look at the ethical values, we know that ethical values are seeking application in the society. And ethical values remain constant, but their application changes in the society. The culture determines it. The law determines it. And I think most importantly, the human conduct determines it. I, as a man, am supposed to show kindness to my family. I cannot be ferocious as a man. And many a times we find that men are cruel. And it doesn't mean that they are cruel because the Sharia has empowered them. I think it's something to do with the culture. And this is where Muhammad Abdu and others, reformers, they made quite clear, by the way, Muhammad Abdu was right, that, there is something that we need to, think about, and this is the rightness or the wrongness of an act.
Thank you. Those were excellent questions from our audience, and I would like to thank them and to remind everybody else who is watching to also submit question if you have one. And in the meantime, I do have another question. You hinted at this, Professor, earlier when you mentioned natural law. So the basic question, is there a natural law in Islam? Does such thing exist?
Yes, I think when you look at the Kalam, Ilm al-Kalam has certain values. It looks at certain beliefs. One of the beliefs that really generates the interests that I have in natural law is the discussion about the will of Allah, the will of God, and the will of human being. Human beings are not without a will because you need irada, you need the willpower to make a decision, to take an action, and to face the consequences. So there is given teleology in the natural ethics of the Quran, which I call natural ethics, is akhlak fitri, because it gives you an ability to take the responsibility of your action. Now, I must say that people have wrongly understood, I think, and I can be corrected by further research, wrongly assumed that the Asharis are simply saying that human beings have no power whatsoever. No, that's not what Asharis are saying. The Ashari theology is saying quite clearly that, look, the commandments of God are such, they are good for human beings. The maqasid of those commandments are telling us that God has the interests of humanities. He wants to give things that are advantageous to humanity. And therefore, there is no way for us to say that, yeah, Asharis, are predeterminist, and therefore, their ethics is, divine ethics. If there is nothing in in the sources, scriptural sources, reason has no power of deciding anything. The debate that I see in the fiqh is the supremacy of scripture over reason, revelation over reason, or reason over revelation. The ultimate say in the Islamic law, by the way, is that say is given to the revelation, because revelation is not dependent upon what we call opinions, rather, it is textual. And it is a culturally given text that should be used in the beginning of analysis. And when we reach a point whereby we are unable to get to that point, then we have to allow reason to speak to us. And the Prophet ﷺ, I think he gave quite clear indication in the Quran that al-aql is intuitive reason. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَعْقِلُونَ is, if only you would use your mind, if you would use your brains, to understand what Allah is trying to tell you, then you will understand much better, much broader. And I think that what we have found is that the ethical theories that the Quran offers lends easily to the natural law. Let's understand about natural law. Natural law is a system whereby human beings are naturally endowed with the ethical values to make a decision about goodness or the badness of an action or intention. And habituation helps it. So you have, Catholics speak about it, Christians speak about it, others are also talking about it. Whereas I think we have the first, obligation to adopt it in our system, because ilm al-kalam, the Mu'tazili or the rationalist ethics, are based on that idea that human beings are responsible for the actions they take. This is known as teleology, but what the Asharis are saying, which is traditionalist ethics, is deontic. When God says something, do it, don't ask. You have to do it. And don't even try to understand the reasons about it. In other words, you are simply obedient. And we want to inculcate in you obedience to Allah, obedience to God. So natural law naturally comes in the Mu'tazili thought, in the thought where human reason is given primacy, or at least a good substantial role. This is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for absolute role for the revelation in our ethical system. But I'm also seeing a very important role being played by the values that are rationally understood, that are reasonably understood. And I think they carry our dialogue, our conversation with the secular ethics. whereby, we are not only talking about the obligation of a man and a woman, the duties that they have to perform just by depending on one particular, aspect of the legal ethical relations, but rather we are saying that legal legalities in Islam or legal action guide is, only the difference between legal action guide and moral action guide is that legal action guide has sanctions behind it. If it guides you, then it also shows you the penalties. Whereas, the moral action guide recommends to you. It's not like fatwa. It's not the fatwa that comes and says, this is the only thing you can do. It's not deontic. Sharia is deontic, whereas we find that rational ethics is something that is connected with the naturally given powers by God. Therefore, I call it in my book infused morality. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. He said, this is infused morality in human beings, that human beings are endowed. My Catholic colleagues tell me, this is amazing that we have something like that. And I'm not, I'm not only trying to please them or anyone else, but I found it very, very, powerful that فطرة الله التي فطر الناس عليها. فطرة الله. That is the divine order. What does that mean? It means natural law on which human beings are created. I can go on forever.
Yeah. No, wonderful. It's so fascinating. And reading it in the book is even obviously broader. We can only summarize it here in our talk. But let me follow up with another question, and then I'll take another question from the audience. The question or the observation while reading the book is that I think this book's unique strength is that it considers both Sunni and Shia methodologies in fiqh and various theological schools within Islam. You seem to be freely engaging with all of them, with Ash'ari and Mu'tazili and Sunni and Shia and different schools of law and theology. What can we learn from this inclusiveness? We do not have many scholars, and especially Muslim scholars, who approach these issues and topics in an inclusive way that you do. So what can be learned from this?
My goal has always been, whenever people ask me, what are you? I say, I'm a Muslim. My Western colleagues say, are you Shiite or Sunnite? I said, no, I'm a Muslim. So I have already crafted for my, my own self-identity, a unified identity of being a Muslim. I will be happy if I die as a Muslim. And I think that that inclusiveness is important for me as I live, in the world today, where today the world it cannot, afford to build these conclaves and enclaves, of sectarian divide. It doesn't help because all these scholars, who are not informed by the nationalisms of the modern times and the divisions of the modern times, they're taught much broadly. If you look at Imam Shafi, he's not thinking about Sunnism. He's thinking about a Muslim being a legal scholar. And what does it mean to prove that we need the Sunnah very badly? We need to refer to Sunnah, and Sunnah is capable of creating the entire juridical system. What does he mean by that? It's informed by the juridical theology that God has created in us responsibility. And we need to respond to our own responsibility and learn about the teleology and deontology, about the ethics, about the law. So Imam Shafi'i, for example, is looking at the connection between law and ethics from the very beginning. If you look at the sentences of the Risala itself, you can feel that Imam Shafi'i is interested to teach something very universal. I'm looking for universality, at least among Muslims. And I want the conversation to continue. I'm not an expert on everything that I say. I'm not an expert on all the Sunni schools. I'm not an expert even in the Shia school. I don't even, use that very much in the book, by the way. But rationalistic ethics are connected with Mu'tazili and the Shiites. Traditionalist ethics are connected with the Asharis and the Sunnis. But even within the Sunnis, there are Mu'tazili thinkers. Because now when I look at the conversation that is going on in the Muslim world about, human rights and Islam, most of our scholars are going back to Mu'tazili thinking. They're saying that we did believe in the freedom of will. Why can't we believe in the freedom of religion, for example? Why should we be punishing apostasy? We should not be doing that. We should be, fair enough. If I don't want to be a Muslim, it's better for me to change my religion than remain a hypocrite in Islam. I'm more dangerous as a hypocrite in my own community than as a non-believer because it's this. That should be let go. This is I think one of the principles that I use and I like it very much. Live and let live. You live and you let others live, and you teach treat all others with the same empathy, with the same respect. If only we can generate this today, it will be a much better world.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is very uplifting. We have another question from Amira Abu Talib. She's asking, how do the Ash'aris interpret evaluative terms in the Quran, such as ma'ruf and ihsan?
They certainly believe that divine provenance provides the broader meanings. So when we look at ihsan as, when to do a favorable act to someone, ihsan, hal jaza'ul ihsan illa al-ihsan. When how can one not respond to good deeds with good deeds? So I think the Ash'aris do not lend themselves to rational interpretation of al-ma'ruf. Actually, it does deserve rational interpretation because ma'ruf is based on the urf, and the urf is something that is known in the society. Al-ma'ruf means the practice has been there all the time in the society. So, the Quran many times says, and act with them with ma'ruf. That means there are already standards available in the Arab tribal system. And those standards are perfectly fine. Just use them because it is known among people that that's what we need to do. They're not waiting for wahy to come. So what I think is missing perhaps in our understanding of the Ash'aris is that I don't think we have paid attention to the usul al-fiqh that is generated by the kalam mutakallimin of Ash'arism. Now, I take here, by the way, Imam Ghazali is an Ash'ari, and when he talks about ethics, it is so deepening and so gratifying. He's the one who talks about the maslaha, by the way, and the maqasid al-shar'iyya. He's the one who's really in charge of that. And he does say that, he doesn't say that only the wahi can, answer all the questions. There are what we call mawhumat. There are unknown things about which we have to speculate. We have to understand it. And that's where we need to apply, those rational, substantially derived at values. Because that's what we know about, let's say, honesty. There are times when in the kitab, in maqasid, in the kitab al-maqasid, rather commercial law, we have, for example, al-ghash, means to cheat someone in advertisement. You show the book and say, this is the book I'm selling. But you never say that it's torn inside. It's not, as good as it looks outside. This is known as ghash. And it's very interesting that fuqaha are, when they actually give their opinions about matajir or makasib, then they are saying that, it's not all right to do the ghash. It is wrong to do the ghash. It's like, telling wrong thing about the thing that you are selling. You shouldn't do that because this is wrong advertising. So there are ways in which the fuqaha have really made us aware. Imam Ghazali speciality, and you can see Shatibi is very, very powerful in those areas.
Thank you very much. I'm aware of the fact that we are already over time, but we did start a little late, so I will allow myself to ask this one final question before we conclude. And that is, in the final chapter of the book, Professor, you call for interpretive jurisprudence ethics. Can you tell us more about this? And what would be the practical consequences of adopting this methodological principle?
Bringing ethics in conversation with our legal procedures and processes will help us to pay attention to the deeper values on which many human beings agree, even if they don't agree with our religion, even if they don't agree with the madhahib, they still are very much keen to understand why is it good, why is it haram, something. In other words, we need to go beyond the legal categories to include in taklif, to include in taklif also the moral dimension. I think the time has come for our ethicists, for our legal scholars, for our jurists to pay attention to the legal ethics and also ethics that are connected with the interpretive jurisprudence. I'm allowed to interpret the text that I read. I allow my subjective opinions to enter. There's no text that can be always objectively interpreted. I choose what is applicable. I say, this is how I understand. I think at that point, we have to try to seek out a universal application. And it comes with ethical analysis. What I'm suggesting, and I've seen, I've read, sections of the fuqaha, at least in Iran, modern fuqaha, saying that, oh, Sharia has nothing to do with ethics. No, they are wrong. In my opinion, they are wrong. If Sharia is concerned with human action, then we have to discuss human action at the level of morality before we consider the legality. In other words, we need to pay attention to both the deontic aspects of the Sharia and rationalistic aspect of the Sharia. And that can come about with the methodology. The method that I'm talking about, for example, look at this one principle that the Prophet said in the early life in Medina, La darar wa la dirar fil Islam. My God, this is a revolutionary principle. It can help any modern decision making today by considering the ethics of the outcome, teleology. If I'm going to build this house and it's going to encroach upon your privacy, am I allowed to do it? No. Why are you not allowed? Because la darar wa la dirar fil Islam. Look at the way this one principle can work so broadly. And I consider that to be the chief, maqsad. Maqasid, this is the chief maqsad, is maslaha itself. How do we see that? How do we interpret it? And how do we open it up for other, areas? Because ultimately, I must confess that maqasid fiqh is dependent upon ijtihad. How do you understand? Why would you interpret it this way? And that point, I think, we need to bring about the value of moral dimension in fortifying our decision. Because what I really am looking for is that we are confident that our decision, our fatwa is valid even today. Because the relevance is very important. If there's no relevance to what we say today, it's like, somebody comes and asks, can my wife work outside the house? And I follow the traditionalist methodology and I say, deontologically, she cannot. But my goodness, in the modern times, if she doesn't work, if she doesn't go out and, bring some money, we don't have enough to eat. How about that? That becomes the ethical issue. So yes, I think at one level, it is deontologically saying that, no, she can't work at house. Or she can't take a political position. Or no, she can't be a judge. Oh, come on. Let's think about it more carefully and see how it is going to harm the society, la darar wa la dirar fil Islam, and how it is going to be, affecting the future relationship. After all, this is my last point, by the way. After all, religions deal with relationships. If they can't maintain relationships, then those religions become irrelevant. In the modern times, relationship is at the center of all human activity in the society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. This is wonderful, and I would just like to let our audience know, if you haven't had a chance to read the book, we've only really scratched the surface. It's a very rich text, and I hope that this will, instigate you and make you read the book, because there is so much to be learned here. I would like to thank our Professor Abdulaziz Sachedina for joining us today. Again, apologies to everyone for being a little late, but technology happens, and alhamdulillah, thank God, we've been able to make it work. We will share this link with our audience, and hopefully more people will be watching this later on and not live. And finally, I would also like to wish everybody Ramadan Kareem, the blessed beginning of the fasting month of Ramadan that is beginning in the next couple of days. And once again, Professor Sachedina, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ermin. Good to talk to your audience. Amira, by the way, Amira is now a friend. She's a graduate student in Helsinki, and she's a good friend now. Yes.
I'm so happy to hear and to see that she was engaging with us today.
Yes,
thank you again.
Yes.
All the best. Khuda Hafiz and Salamu Alaikum, everybody.
Khuda Hafiz wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.